right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the next concurrent session of the day. What is reality? Our presenter today is Nick Britton. Nick is the chair of communication and foreign language at Lake Michigan College, and his main area of expertise is in technology in the classroom. He also studies the nature of fear and the role of the macabre, plays in Western social mythologies. Now, if anyone has any questions for the presenter during the session, please feel free to submit those in the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom room screen, and we will be able to address those at the end of the talk. And on that note, I will go ahead and hand it over to our presenter.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm glad to be back this year. I'm hoping maybe next year we could be face-to-face again. I'm tired of these Zoom meetings. So, yeah, I'm the tech guy at LMC, but yeah, even I like to get back in the room once in a while. But yeah, so I'll go ahead, tell you a little bit about myself real quick. I'm an English instructor by trade, but then I'm also the chair of comm and foreign language as well. So I don't teach those particular subjects, but and so I've been working with the virtual reality lab at Lake Michigan College, where, for those of you familiar with Michigan, we use our hand as a map, and I'm down, get the camera right over here, kind of over towards Chicago. That's the big city nearest us. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. We'll get started. So it's journey. What is reality? Journeys from the classroom. And so we live in a time now where we can do a lot more from within the classroom, than just like the field trips, when we used to be able to leave the room and go, off on location. Now virtual reality gives us a lot more power, a lot more depth than what was, possible in previous years. So with that in mind, what is reality now? What exactly is, and we live in really weird times, right? This is definitely a peculiar time to be alive. And so imagine if we were to go back in time to like really any earlier society. Let's just pick 2,000 years ago in Europe, just because that's a good time. Go back to about the year zero, Europe. And if you were to explain to them that there was a system, there was a thing in place that allowed us to communicate with anyone pretty much anyone on the planet. It told us the weather, it allowed us to order food, it provided almost all of our entertainment, it could answer basically any question, and all we had to do was offer a monthly sacrifice of money, plus keep in mind it also observes all of our actions. What would they think? They would probably just assume you were discussing a god, right? That's something. And when you put the internet and our devices in those terms, it seems rather divine almost. And so we don't really think of it that way. We think, oh, no, we're grounded in science. But when you think about what it really does, it's pretty, it has this kind of almost magical power to it that's pretty new. Humans have not really been in this situation prior to now. And so it does remind me, say, of like an ancient society maybe who was bonded by religion and by notions of the way the world works, and sort of had these shared mythologies. Our internet kind of does that for us today. And so what have we created with this? What is this thing? How do we respond to it? Because it seems like it's exceeded us. Like it seems like it's just changed the way we look at the world now. It's changed what it means to be human. And as tough as the 2020s are off to an interesting start, right? But as tough as it is, it's a really interesting time to be an educator. We're seeing profound changes. And now we have, at relatively low cost, new tools that can help us reach students in pretty exciting ways. Because think about this. We really started the education system that we have now in the United States, let's say 150 years ago, give or take. Kind of depends on where you want to start, but not much really changed. Once we got the idea of literacy and we decided as a society we're going to focus on, bringing literacy to everyone, it was kind of the same, where we're learning from books. We we have paper, we're writing on paper. Even once we got computers in the classroom, Microsoft Word, Google Docs, and so on, they look like paper. It's supposed to look like that sort of reality, right? That it's almost as if even if you're writing something on a desk, then it looks like you're writing on your desktop. And so there were certainly changes in approach, quality, these sorts of things. They're not to be overlooked, but the school classroom looked pretty similar for quite a long time. that we were kind of using the same basic approach. Teacher at the front of the room, students in the classroom sitting down, and then, books happen, right? And I'm a lit guy, right? I'm pro book. I don't want anybody to think I'm, condemning the act of reading and school and these sorts of things. But it got a little static. Okay. So now enter reality, virtual reality. And I'll just put this on. I'm going to mute it, hopefully. Yep. And so just in the background, this is this was a local media covered us, Lake Michigan College, and what we do. And so over here on the side, you'll see some students doing stuff. Right now, he's zooming through he was going through the bloodstream. He was like in a little rocket ship that could fly through the bloodstream. And that's what I look like when I'm not flat on a screen here. So. But before COVID hit, we were developing VR labs at Lake Michigan College, and so this is what the Niles lab, we have 3 campuses, we have 2 labs, and this is what the campus I work at looked like. We're right here on the border with Indiana. And we're now able to pick it back up. Luckily the levels of transmission in Michigan have gotten low enough to where we're back to face. We're able to get back in the room a little bit. And so we're kind of able to pick up where we left. And so you can see we have 2 units, and these carpets are kind of each student, that way they're in their own zone. They don't trip over each other because you can't see outside the headset, right? So you're just seeing, and so if you notice on the screens when those pop back up, you'll see what they're seeing, what they're immersed in entirely. And so that's our lab at Niles, right? And they give us a little shout out there. So it's called the Bertrand Crossing campus, but it's the city of Niles. And that's what the computers look like. So immediately people say, well, that looks expensive, right? That, particularly coming from the humanities, our budgets aren't exactly huge, right? We money's tight. We don't have deep coffers, deep pockets. So how much does this all cost? Before we go any farther, is this something that your department can afford? It's not exactly inexpensive. It's not free. It's not the cost of, say, like a flash drive or a book or something, but it's not as bad as you might think. We have 2 HTC Vives in that room, and those cost about $1,000 a piece. And then we have the computers capable of using them, which are about $2,000 a piece. So it's a few $1,000s in that room. Now, I was able to get a couple grants, and that covered it. LMC certainly doesn't. Our English budget is not $10,000 a year, but I was able to get a couple grants for it. Maybe more accessible is the Oculus Quest. And when I have those under $500, they're usually probably closer to $300 or $400. And those are nice because they don't need. I'll show you a little bit about those later on. Those don't need the computers. Those don't need a ton of space. They're really handy, accessible tools. They're really easy to get a hold of. And they have some advantages too, in that the computers you got to program them, you got to get the stuff in there, you got to have a dedicated space. The Quest is nice because it just comes in a box, and it's portable. You just put up the system wherever you want, as long as you have to have a Wi-Fi connection. At this time, you do have to have a Facebook account, and it has to be a real Facebook account. And so that's sometimes a bit of a hang up, although that's literally in the courts right now. That's probably not going to hold, would be my not an expert opinion on that, but I don't think that's going to hold up forever. And so you do need that space. Now you need the space for the computers, and we have a room that just wasn't being used, and so I co-opted it. I just said, hey, I'm going to use this now. The Quests, you don't need that. Those you can bring right into a classroom. You just need a 6x6 foot square, and you can make the Quest work. So it's well worth checking that. If you want to see more of those, you can always contact me, or just go to YouTube, and you'll see bazillions of ads and videos and how to use them and stuff like that. Now, here's some examples of how we've used it. What have I done with it? And so with this one, the experience doesn't show on the screen too well. It's just black. But these 2 students are in a system where we read Hamlet last semester. And so if you're familiar with Hamlet, it's about a guy who finds out that society's not what he thought, right? That, the society is not really, he's trying to make sense of Denmark. Something's rotten in Denmark, and he doesn't quite get it. And so we read that and we go over it. And then particular lines that really stand out to me: his will is not his own, no is not seems, these sorts of important quotes that English instructors, we tend to fixate on those. And so in this experience, the reason I have her feet up, she didn't want to do this. She didn't want to have the feet up, but she did. In the experience, you're on like a gurney, and this sort of robot comes out and starts questioning you and asking you, like, he was programmed to love, but yet he seems disposable. The humans threw him away, and he doesn't understand that why wouldn't they love him back? And so he tries to fix humans so that they do love him. And he can tell by the look in your eye that you don't love him. So he's going to fix you. And of course, he holds up a hacksaw at the end of it. Um, so on one hand, the experience works as far as it's scary, it's immersive, it's terrifying to be sort of stuck there, and we get some nice cringes and screams and stuff from students too. But I think it works really nicely with Hamlet. And one problem with a play like Hamlet is that we don't usually see it like a play, right? The version of Hamlet that we have would be pretty alien to Shakespeare. He would say, yeah, that's not what I intended. He didn't expect people to read that in a book. And even if we do take him to a live performance, even that is not really what Shakespeare would have intended, right? His plays look different. The playhouse was set up different. The globe is different than we're going to see a play today. It was during the day. It wouldn't have been at night. There was more social protocols. It was honestly a much more violent, nasty, icky, smelly affair than what we'd have now. Shakespeare, I think, would be dumbfounded by we get dressed up and spend hundreds of dollars to go see his plays and these nice regal events. And back in his day, he would have said, "No, it's supposed to be much grittier." And so it's nice. We also don't really get the stage notes, right? We don't have stage direction. And so we have to sort of make the experience ourselves in our heads. So I think that it's nice to have this other perspective, that what themes, the themes are still there. How can we connect it to other texts? So he attempts to fix this, like I say, at the end with that hacksaw, which sort of, hey, spoilers, at the end of Hamlet, he tries to fix things by, hey, Claudius, why don't you act like you should? Well, I'll fix you with this sword and this poison, and tries to fix things. So I don't think the experience is called Abe. I don't think they necessarily had Hamlet in mind, but I think that the thematically, there's some similarities that are worth discussing, and we can bring those quotes in. Hey, what is our will our own? That sort of thing. Is our mind our own? What kind of willpower do we have? Now, this was one we did in contemporary fiction this semester. And so you can see what she's walking on this board, and you can see up here that's what she's seeing, and she's way up high, like hundreds of feet up in the air. And so you can see she's trying pretty hard not to fall, because you will fall in the experience. I like to use that one because it's not particularly literary. What I'm doing is I'm prepping them for something else. We had looked at some science fiction in the class, some more recent. It was an episode of Black Mirror, actually. And I like to do this one because it really shows the physical, visceral response that you get from VR. And so I'm sure the people in here, we've read a book before, where probably numerous times for most of us, where you kind of forget that you're reading, right? You don't really think about, I'm sitting here and I've got this book in my hand and I can feel it in the pages, and that's what I'm currently doing. And you don't realize that you've been sort of sitting there staring at this inanimate object for like 2 hours or an hour, however long it's been. You don't realize that if somebody had no concept of reading and they walked in and saw you, they'd wonder what's up with that person. Why are they just like staring at this thing unflinchingly for so long? But your heart rate goes up, right? You get scared, you get sad, you have this response to the text, and actually start reading faster. You probably do this. You start getting closer to the book. Maybe it really gets exciting. That experience always happened to me with Harry Potter, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. I'm an English instructor, and to me, Harry Potter just was the apex of literature published in my lifetime. But so what I like to do is do that with VR too, because I want to get them. And what's really fun is the fear people fear when they see this. They feel actual. They're standing in a room. It's very similar to like a book experience. They're standing in this room. They know it. They put the headset on, and all of a sudden they're in this world. And they're not in the classroom world anymore. And so you can see them really tense up. Even the brave ones, tense up. And then they walk, and she's wobbling, and she's really scared about it. And if they fall, you actually fall off the board. And what's really nice is they scream a little bit. And then when it hits, when your character hits, this white light happens, and it sounds sort of angelic, kind of implying that, yeah, you died. And you can see their bodies shift, like they lurch. It's a great experience to put like deans in and vice presidents. If you can get an admin in there, oh, it's amazing. Purely my own sadistic self-satisfaction. With students, it's a learning experience. If I get one of the supervisors in there, yeah, it's just for fun. Yeah, so really get them in there, get them tied into it, and then we say, okay, now we're going to go back to reading, and hopefully it sort of broadened them to the experience, open them up to the idea of fiction a little bit and what you can do with it. Now, as far as diversity and inclusion, this is a really exciting opportunity that we have with VR, because you can probably tell by looking at me, I identify as a cis white male, straight male. I'm just, that's what I am. I've had a lot of privilege, right, in my life, right? American society is kind of set up historically and presently to benefit, to my demographic. And I can read about it all I want. I can read about diversity and inclusion. I can talk to firsthand. I can see firsthand accounts. I can talk to people. I can look at experts, talk to them, try to do my best to understand. But I can't really get outside of who I am. When I look at the world, I'm looking through my eyes, right? And I'm seeing this world, and people are looking at me and seeing me as well. And there's just not much I can do about that. And as far as like with the big things, something that's really extreme, like a Klan member, a Nazi or something, I can explicitly look at that and say, yeah, that's obviously wrong, right? Burning a cross and some, terrorism. These are wrong things that we shouldn't do. But those microaggressions, those are tough. Those are tricky, right? Those really subtle things that, frankly, if I'm being honest, I'm probably guilty of, and I don't mean to be, I don't want to be, but I'm sure at some point, yeah, I've definitely made mistakes. And I regret that, but I just, it's difficult. With VR, you can have these really deep experiences, right? Where you actually sort of become somebody else. You're seeing other people look at you as somebody different than what you are. And so it shows that while we all live in the same planet, maybe even the same community, we kind of inhabit different worlds. And so it really takes you out of that and puts you into some situations that you just can't replicate. As great as books are, as great as first person interviews are, it's not the same. It's not the same as being in it. So let's go over some examples here. This is a great experience. This is a shot here from something that's called Traveling While Black. Okay. And this scene here is oh, and I'm blanking on the cafe's name, the diner's name. Well, there's a diner in Washington, D.C., and what the whole experience is about is there were in the era of Jim Crow, right? So we're going back a little bit. There were certain rules about unspoken, sometimes spoken, sometimes unspoken. And if you're African American and you got on the bus in D.C., it was, legally you could sit anywhere you wanted on that bus. But now, of course, there were, not legal things that were going on too. But legally, they had some rights. They were, but if they went south, and let's say they were visiting, they wanted to go down to Alabama or Georgia or something like that, not to pick on those states, but, we have to be honest about our history here. The rules changed as they went along. And so there was a green book, which I didn't know about until this experience came out. And it was a guide. It was a travel guide for if you're Black and you're traveling the country. This book listed places that were going to be safe, that were going to be, legitimate. Hey, you can go here and be treated like a person, kind of thing. Although a lot of people, and it explains to you, and so you get on this experience, and sometimes you're in this diner. This is a diner where it was kind of a hot spot, like it was a spot where African Americans could get together and be safe and be treated, equally. And to this day, it still maintains a certain historical relevance to these communities. And so, but you get on the bus and you're in the back and you're sort of seeing the bus from what it's like to be in the back, and you're hearing narratives about folks who get on these buses, and maybe it's a 10-hour drive. They had to bring their lunch with them because he said, I'm not getting off in certain communities because once I get off the bus, they might not let me back on. Seat might be gone. I don't know what the restaurants are like here. What if they don't want me around? Including not even being able to go to the bathroom. Just had to sit and deal with it. I had never, and never, it's something I just didn't know. History class didn't pick that up. This video is like 13 minutes long, covers a lot of information. And so sitting there and thinking about that and hearing, okay, what if this was just what I saw for the next couple of days? I couldn't get up and do anything because, what society. And so then it goes through through modern day. This is Tamir Rice's mother, if you guys remember Tamir Rice. So if you can imagine the impact of sitting at a diner, it's almost like you're there with her. And she's explaining what it was like when what happened to Tamir happened, right, when the police killed him. And she's explaining how she couldn't get to him. She couldn't say goodbye. She had children with her, his siblings. She had to make a decision. Do I stay with them here in the street, or do I get in the ambulance and go with Tamir to the hospital? And she had to make that decision on the spot. She woke up this morning. She had no idea their life was going to be forever changed. She had to do that like right now. She had seconds to think about it. And hearing that story face to face, where you're sitting at a diner surrounded by these other people of this community, a community of which I am not a part, but I sort of felt like I was a little bit. And what's really nice is you can see they're all listening to her tell the story. And this lady in particular, she starts breaking down. She starts crying. And this is one of those experiences where I'm a tough guy. I'm as manly as anybody, and the tears are flowing. Right, it gets you in a way that really nothing else is going to get you. Right, it's a fascinating, very quick. We're talking 15 minutes in and out. Really interesting stuff. So this one's available on the Oculus Quest, by the way. You can access this for those less expensive devices. Right, it's really easy to get. Abe is the one we talked about earlier. That's the one where I associate with Hamlet. Vestige is interesting. This is another one where if you need a good cry, Vestige is really nice for this. It doesn't deal with race, but it's a lady whose fiance, she lived with him. Sorry, my headset died there for a second. Do I still have volume? It looks like. But yeah, her fiance died unexpectedly in the night, and he just had like a heart attack, and it was unexpected. And she's telling the story of what it was like to be with him. And so as she's telling the story, images are sort of popping off of memories, and it's done really expertly. Oh, we have a chat here. Okay, yep. So Cody, you guys can hear me. But she's sort of going through those experiences and having these, and it's really neat because it's not filmed like this. This is like, this is people, right? This is recording. That one's more animated. It's a little bit more ghostly, almost memory-like. Really impacts. That's one we're going to do later on in my contemporary fiction class, and it deals with loss. That's another one where I don't care how tough you are. That's one that's going to get you. Now I could tell that story. I could say, hey, this woman's fiance died. It was unexpected. He died young. He died, was like 32. It's terrible, tragic story. And you say, man, that's tragic. And then we sort of move on to our next talking point. Get an experience, about 10 minutes is all it takes. And all of a sudden it's much more real. It's much more intense, much more involved than just, you really get that concentration of emotion by being there. So to proceed here, you can also do some equal reality, where this is neat. This is the guy, right? So this is the person in the experience, but that's what he looks like. He's a. I'm assuming she's an African American woman, certainly not a Caucasian man, and so and as he moves, she mimics that movement. And these controllers here, they replicate. It's going to move her hands as he moves his head. Her head moves, and now so you can picture that. So this guy, he's going to experience life as a woman of a minority status, double minority really, and he's going to go through business meetings and memberships and things like that, sort of go through a professional setting as a woman. This was a fascinating one. This was one that really slapped me pretty hard because I fancied myself a woke person. I thought I knew what was going on, right? Sure, I'm not sexist. I'm a understanding, capable guy, and then I did that. And it's so subtle sometimes that I put this other guy in it. He's one of our communication folks, and big guy. He's this giant. He played college football. He's a big guy, real And he went in there and he came out white faced. I mean, he was just as a ghost. And he said, "Oh my God." He was just speechless. This is a speech instructor, mind you, by the way, but he teaches public speaking, and he had nothing. He said, "I have nothing to say." He's like, "I can't believe that." He said, "I've probably done that. I've probably been that guy." He was terrified. And he's like, this causes me to rethink everything, his entire approach to things. It was really neat to observe. I haven't had a chance to do that in class yet, but boy, I think that's going to be fun. It's fun putting, obviously I work with a lot of professional women. It's fun putting them in there and they say, yeah, that's accurate. That is what it's like. One of our high-ranking admins, I won't tell you who it is, but she was pretty high-ranking, and she did it and said some expletives. She was pretty intense, had an intense experience for, and she said, yeah, that the boys, she said, in the cabinet, meaning the Lake Michigan College cabinet, are going to do this. Now they're good people, but she said, yeah, I'll suggest something, and it just goes to the next person. But as soon as one of those boys says it, all of a sudden it's the best idea they've ever heard. It's subtle things like that, right? It's just those microaggressions, those little things that just fly on a radar, but they add up, right? It adds up and it becomes like a really systemic major issue. A little bit lighter note, there's an experience called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. This can be a really fun one, good for team building. It's good for communication. And so in this experience, these are all a few bucks, but equal reality is expensive, but the rest of them are pretty free or a few dollars. This one's nice, way off, completely different. The people in the headset, so be like this, see a kind of a cartoon animated bomb. It's not going to trigger anybody. It's pretty animated. And then the people outside the experience see the instructions on how to disarm it. and they don't see each other's stuff, right? And so the person inside has to describe what they see, and then the person with the manual has to flip to it and say, okay, do you see a blue wire? And they say, yeah. So you, okay, pull it. So you pull the blue wire. Says, okay, what happened? Well, this red light lit up. Okay, they flip pages. Red light lit up. Okay, now do this. And the fun part is it's timed, right? There's a timer, and the person inside the headset can see it. It is terrifying when that timer hits 1 minute, okay, because it turns red, right? It really starts triggering you. Really cool ice-breaking team building type experience. Actually pairs up nicely with equal reality. Do that one first, sort of get this, hey, let's get this on the table. Let's talk about race and gender and things like that. They also have homosexual experiences, experiences for people in wheelchairs. Things. It covers the gamut here. Lots of different experiences. And then do that, and then do this one. Try to build teams. Kind of wake everybody up to something, and then let's see if we can communicate. Now, how does it change things? And of course, Richie's plank experience, which we saw earlier, which is just a delight to put people in. It's a lot of fun. Really gets the heart rate going. Now, so for an example assignment here, this would be, this is like the flat screen. They sort of have a video version of it. And so it sort of goes through, and I could play it, but you guys can find these online. Allie, right? Her name's Allie. And the guy comes into the meeting and he says, he meets her and he says, oh, can you get me a cup of coffee? Right. And we've all probably heard of this. Some people probably sadly have been on the receiving end of that. And she's sort of dismissed. And then the other guy comes in for the meeting that works for your company. He's the client. Then the other guy comes and works for you, and he says, the client says, okay, where's Ali? And the guy says, who? And he says, Ali, the guy who's working on our project. And says, oh, well, this is Allie. She's the one who built your project. And he says, oh, well, I'm so sorry. And he's like, oh, and he's trying to work himself out of it. But of course, he's digging a deeper hole. And he says, oh, I'm sorry, but yeah, you've got to understand, you look just like my daughter and you're so young, but yet so accomplished. And it's like, you're just making it worse, dude, right? You're making it a little bit worse. And so a lot worse, actually. And so the experience, and of course, he asks your opinion and dismisses it and these sorts of things, the things we would expect, that we can that from my perspective, if I hear about it, I can say, oh yeah, that's wrong. I know that on a conscious level, in my heart, in my mind, I know this is wrong. But once I've experienced it, now I can really feel it, like at an emotional level, feel what it's like to be dismissed, right? To feel what it's like to be overlooked, which is something that, frankly, I can't really replicate, right, in real life. I have to have a VR unit to replicate this experience. And so for my gender class, gender LGBTQ plus literature studies, we're going to bring that in and then we can start analyzing different texts from different perspectives. Really brings in that idea of what do female authors see when they look at the world? How about the female characters? How are the different characters portrayed? Who's the spotlight on? Why is it on that person? So on and so forth. Kind of levels the field a little bit for everybody in the class. And so we'll record responses. We can connect it to specific tests. We'll do this early in the semester, and then we'll reference it throughout the semester. Hey, with that in mind, let's look at how, for example, Margaret Atwood's work, bring Margaret Atwood to the VR experience like this would be a lot of fun. We also even do things with like Interview with a Vampire, right? We read the book, we don't watch the film, because there's all kinds of neat stuff. Female author writing about men. There's those nice homosexual overtones to it too. It's really a lot to unpack in that particular novel, and this will sort of get us going, get us thinking about that. And so they'll be able to having done this experience, it won't just be, well, yeah, we read these books about, people who are different than me. No, to be like, no, you were actually there for a minute. For 5 minutes, you got to step out of who you are and step into somebody else. So it should really be a nice experience. It'll be the first time we've tried it, but we can do a lot with it, I think. I think it's going to be a fun time. Plus, it engages students, right? It's something that students kind of look forward to. Attendance tends to be high on VR day, right? People are going to come in for that. Now, one thing is, it's a library, right? Virtual reality has just created a new library. That's all it is. And so you don't have to build or create any of this content. That's something that until last week, I was working with some folks from Notre Dame. They're right next to us, and a completely different school. We're a community college, relatively low income community, much lighter budget. Well, they have a deep budget, a much bigger school. They're several times larger than we are. And they said, well, our instructors are afraid that they have to build this stuff, and that's not how, they don't know how to do it, right? And I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to build a VR experience, but you don't have to. Yeah, I don't know how to publish a book either, but I certainly know how to assign one. I know how to read one. I know how to make an assignment off of like a particular chapter or something like that. This stuff just exists. You just go and click on the one you want, download it, pay the fee or whatever. Most of the experiences are really inexpensive too. They're less expensive than books. You do have to pay for the equipment, which can range anywhere from those $400 devices I was talking about all the way up to however much you want to spend. But the experiences themselves are less expensive than most books. Every once in a while, you might run across one that's like, $30 or something like that. Most of them are free or like $5, something like that. And what's nice is that once you buy it, not everybody has to. Not every student has to buy it. The school can buy it and then just bring people in for the experience, right? You can have your class come in and do it. So it's actually kind of a good deal when you think about it. And there's plenty of titles. Sometimes they want me, well, budget, plan out your budget. How much are you going to need for this? And we're talking in the hundreds. We're not talking in the thousands. And I'll say, look, new stuff's coming out literally every day. You got to kind of keep up with it. And there's plenty of good titles. You don't have to it's not going to change. The canon doesn't change every 10 minutes or anything. The canon's still the canon, just like we have in like a more traditional literature library. But there's plenty. I can't always tell what's going to be the next big one. So I'll say, look, I need $200 or something like that for my budget this year. And that's plenty. I haven't ever used $200 in a single year on experiences. I've certainly spent more than $200 on books. So it's actually less expensive. It does create a little bit of equity when you think about it. So ultimately, what does it do? VR allows us to start wherever, whenever we are and go anywhere, when we want to. You can, my students are in Niles, Michigan, okay? And we're a lovely community. The city is a little aesthetically challenged. It's not the prettiest. Right now, it's a lot of slush, a lot of mud. People think of Michigan, they think of snow. I'm in the southern part, so think more slushy mud. That's what we tend to have here. We actually get more rain than Seattle, so we're this wet, icky, rusty spot at the road. But yeah, and so far, just this semester, I let my students have a little bit of free time. I said, yeah, you can go anywhere. We went into Google Earth, and they were going to all over the world. Germany, Kyiv, go to Ukraine. You can go check that out. Boy, that's an experience to go see what Ukraine looked like last year versus, then you look at the news images and see what it's like today. Boy, that can really hit home. And also you can even go in the past. They have some historical experiences you can bring up too. And so like education itself, kind of the goal of education, right, is to transform, right? It's to make us change, and so this is something that sometimes I'm always telling myself this, that I know I got, I went to grad school and all this, I'm a smart guy, right? I've got all these pieces of paper say, hey, I'm a smart guy. But I always tell my students, I learn more, hopefully I learn as much or more than they do in a given semester. I get paid to learn. And so if I were to get static and just say, look, these texts and these concepts, that's it. Right? That's what we do. And this is how you properly do stuff. This is how education works. At that point, I've always told myself, I tell my family, tell my friends, as soon as I start saying stuff like that, tell me to retire. It's time for me to be done. As soon as I get static and stop changing, just kick me out, fire me, get rid of me. I need to keep fresh. I need to keep the ideas going. I need to be the best student in the room, right? I think that's what all educators have to be. And so VR allows me to do that. That allows me to keep going, keep learning. And so it allows us to learn new ways of learning. It allows us to relate to other people, see things from their perspective. So if anybody's familiar with the show, it came from Westworld. And she's a robot, a really super innocent robot at the time of this scene. But then by the end of it, of course, she's turns into a killer robot. So yeah, so it's kind of an interesting film like that. The HBO series. But yeah, so there's obviously a little bit of potential for all kinds of things to happen here. But yeah, so it does really open us up. It reminds me, it's a new type of literacy. When you think about it, where, say, go back to the Declaration of Independence. Let's go back to 1776. The founding fathers are working on this. And what's interesting, what I always found fascinating, is that we talk about literacy. A lot of people at the time of, say, 1776, they could read, right? They could read documents. That wasn't uncommon, but they couldn't write documents. They didn't know how to do that part of it, right? They could read the words, they knew what the symbols meant, not on the level like Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, but they could basically get by. I mean, they had a certain level of textual literacy. They couldn't write. And then say it moves on, and so we start getting people to where they can write, they can read, they can produce their own text, and so it changed things. So where now books became more important. You could produce your own materials, marketing, business changed. We're kind of at that level now. think about this where the early adopters of VR, we kind of give our students, I think, an advantage because we're going to be learning and taking these new things, these new types of literacy before others. You know, that we're this is a new thing. It's not going away, right? VR is going to be going on, and you need to have a certain amount of literacy to exist in it. And it does allow you to just like how writing allows you to sort of take thoughts out of your head and sort of store them on a page and look at them. I'm sure all the English instructors out there try to explain this with outlines and brainstorms, and we'll just get your ideas on a page. You can look at them and move them around. VR does the same thing, just in a different way, right? It's getting stuff out there for your brain to observe and get you to see things from different perspectives, different angles. So it's kind of like this ultimate brainstorming experience, maybe brainstorming ideas you didn't know you had. It can really do a lot for you. So with that, that's actually my last slide. I wanted to keep it sort of short and sweet here. I know there's going to be some, there's a lot to take in here. Does anybody have questions or comments? I can't see if anyone's in the queue or the group or anything.
There have not been any questions submitted yet, but if anyone does have any questions, you can put them into the Q&A area in the chat. We've got a lot of time, so feel free. And it looks like one just came in. So Christine asked, do you have any specific ideas regarding use of VR with ESL students?
Yeah, so we, actually being the foreign language here too, it's nice. Before I do that, let me back up just a little bit and say, first off, for the American-born English-speaking, English as a first language students, what we can do in on the foreign language department is they, rather than saying, there's this idea in the United States to where everything south of here is kind of like, it's variations of Mexico, right? People think Spanish, they think Mexico, they think Mexico City, these sorts of things. They don't really think of how diverse Latin America can get. And so we can go to different cities, right? We can go to Mexico City, we can go to Bolivia, we can go to Colombia, things like that, see the different parts of the world. As far as students who are we haven't explicitly the students who maybe are just picking up English, right? We're working on that because in our community we have a lot of Spanish-speaking folks. The problem is we're having a hard time connecting with them because understandably they're a little reluctant, right? They're a little reluctant to come into institutions and say, hey, here I am, I don't know the language, and here I go. And so enrollment's a little low in those departments. We know the people are there. We're just having a hard time. Now, luckily, we have a particularly brilliant lady who's been working on it. COVID definitely hindered her plans, but now we're back. And so she's going to start going there. She's very good. And so it could be really nice to maybe put people in different scenarios and expose them to different parts of American society, even in part because it allows you, it's a safe place. Right. And so instead of going on a field trip where you're expected to know English, we're expected to know the mannerisms and the social cues, they can get in here and sort of practice and warm up a little bit and see what different environments look like. Because even the idea of an American grocery store can be overwhelming, right, for some folks. If you're not used to massive mega box capitalism like we have, it can be a lot. And so simple, subtle things. And so we can put people into interesting scenarios. There is some foreign language material. The problem is it's mostly being driven by, VR is mostly being driven by the United States, Japan, and Northern Europe. And these are the countries that really seem to be like the hotspots for it. So far, there's not been a ton that has been available to that's being designed with those folks in mind, let's say people from Latin America coming up. That hasn't been an audience yet, although it should be. That's something that I think I'm keeping an eye on, and I think that more experiences will come out. Now, what's cool is you can also connect with people. So you can arrange. We haven't been able to do this yet because, again, we had to shut everything down. But you can also connect and get into VR rooms with other folks in other countries or other regions and all be in the same room together and have your avatars talking. And so that could be a really neat experience, but you'd need a partnership. You need another school to connect with you to pull that off. And that's something that we're looking to do. And that could be really helpful where, a student who say they grew up in a Spanish speaking household in Michigan, they can connect with somebody Spanish speaking in say Colorado. Maybe they can make some friends and say, hey, what have been your experiences over in Denver versus over here in Niles? Things like that. So there's some potential. Haven't had the chance to do it yet. What about software for math? That's a cool question. Now I have to take some people's word for this one. So one of the guys who's working on this, I've sort of partnered up with our CIS folks, or computer information science folks. And now I'm an English guy, which means that I've pretty much got my addition and subtraction basically down. Okay, I pretty much have those. I can multiply and divide, and then you start throwing other stuff, and it gets lower. These guys understand it, so they'll look at calculus and they'll say, "Cool, I know what this stuff means." I know that one of the CIS guys went in there and came out. He did some there was like some three-dimensional graphing and things like that, that gets into VR that you can do in there, and that's apparently like high-level calculus. I took his word for it. He explained it to me, and I said, "Yeah, that sounds brilliant." And he came out and said, "This is amazing. This is a way to put these equations and these algorithms into, give them more depth and really work with them and do some things." And so, yeah, he seemed really fascinated by it. So, yeah, that stuff exists. Now, I tend to avoid that. I don't really know that stuff too well because it's just not something I needed. I had to go through pre-calculus in undergrad, and that was, not my forte. But yeah, those experiences exist, and there's a lot of them. I'm coming from the literature perspective, but the sciences, there's more for math and science than there is for literature, for sure. It's that's the group that's driving it. And what's really nice too is my contact at Notre Dame, he's a math guy, and he's replicating his entire building, his IT lab, in VR. And he's building it. He has to put the right angles and everything in there in the correct proportions and all this. I imagine a lot of math is involved there. And so somebody can actually walk through, in VR, can walk through that building and see it. And so it's a really nice practical way of approaching math, right? Because that's been one of my issues with math instruction, is it's so abstract. It doesn't really connect, right? It's just like, why do I need to know this? Well, if you make it really practical and real and say, look, we can build a building here, we can do this with it, here it is in space, here it is how it actually works, you can do a lot of fun stuff. And so it probably makes it really engaging, especially for folks like me who are maybe a little reluctant to dive in the math world. I would definitely dive in more with some of these experiences that are available for you. So yeah, there's a huge catalog there. I'm not intimately familiar with them, but yeah, that's the math has more than English does. So. All right, anybody else? Anybody have questions about like practical, like money? How much does it cost? What's the Oculus Quest look like? How does it work? Don't let it intimidate you here. This stuff is, I guess one thing I do want to bring up is that it does take a little bit of IT support to have the Quests, to have the computers in place. You are going to have to work with your IT folks. What's nice about the Quest is that and I should have brought it, I can see it from here, but if I get up, it'll look silly. But it just comes in a box, and you literally you take one of the controllers and just draw a square on the floor. You put the headset on, draw a square, and boom, then you're in. And that's all you need. You don't have to plug you have to plug it in to charge it, but that's it. And you're ready to go. And you can have it right in your room. Now, what's nice is when that first came out, initially people said, well, it's inexpensive. It's going to be video game based. It's mostly for kids to play games on. And there's a lot of games. You can play Beat Saber. You can play Super Hot VR, these sorts of games. But because of the cost, how accessible it is, how easy it is to use, you don't need an IT degree to make this work, right? Then education started diving in. That's where you're going to get Traveling While Black, things like that. Google Earth is going to be in there because it's so easy to use that teachers are jumping on it. And a lot of times budgets can afford $400 to make it work. And so that can be definitely, remember those words, Oculus Quest. That's a really nice system, really inexpensive, super easy to use. So.
All right, I'll mention one more time really quickly for everyone. If you do have any additional questions, we've got another minute here, so you can submit them. But if you don't see anything come through in a few seconds, we can end a few minutes early, give everyone a chance to hop into the exhibit hall, but see if anybody has anything else right now. All right, looks like we don't have any more coming in, and we are right up on our time, so cool. That works out anyway. Right, so I'll say a quick thank you to everyone for joining, and a thank you to Nick for all the valuable information that you just shared. So just for everyone's knowledge, the next concurrent session will begin at 3 p.m. Eastern time. You can view the chat for session meeting room links or access to the conference website for a complete list of the concurrent sessions and their descriptions. I'll be pasting those into the chat in just a moment. Now, really quickly, while you are accessing the conference website, please do not forget to swing by the exhibit hall to say hello to the Hawks team. If you just watch a quick 5-minute demonstration, you can be entered to win our hourly giveaway, which is going to be your choice of a 6-month subscription to Audible, a 1-year subscription to Disney Plus, or a $100 Amazon gift card. So those are some pretty solid prizes you could win for 5 minutes of your time. But once again,